All right, welcome. Welcome to everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. So, if you're interested in this topic, the inner earth, Shambhala, Agartha, any of that there, these underground mysterious kingdoms, cavern systems, lost and hidden ancient civilizations, and all that. If you're interested in any of those topics, I urge you to hear me out and hear this interesting video here. And hopefully I can get the chance to share all the information without being interrupted because it's rather late. But nonetheless, let us begin. So I will say first that I am not claiming that I have gone there in person. Okay, I am not crazy. These are, as per the video description, uh, genuine experiences that I've had in dreams. Now, one of the reasons why I'm sharing it now, I've always wanted to share this type of stuff. Now and then I do share it, but these dreams I've had for a very long time, probably most of my life, as far back as I can remember. But they're so real, they're so highly detailed. And because I always go back to these places, certain places in the inner earth regions, if you'll call it that, especially ones with all these gemstone deposits. I've always loved gemstones since I was a child, so that's one of the reasons I have an affinity for that. But I very frequently go back to these even specific locations in my dreams, and I've gone back to certain ones so many times that I remember the secret entrances in the surface world to go access to the inner earth kingdoms. So I have a lot of very interesting stories and journeys to share. But again, these are dreams. But I'm sharing it because, maybe there is something, to our reality that our science hasn't fully grasped yet. Maybe in another couple hundred years, we would know that perhaps when you dream at night in your sleep, that maybe all people or maybe some people are able to somehow disconnect their consciousness from their physical body, or maybe even just on a quantum type level, and you're able to journey to these places that are still on this earth, but maybe for whatever reason you can go down through the layers, so to speak. It's just a hypothesis, but the reason why I'm saying that is because I have the dream so often, the places are so real and detailed, and I go back there even to specific locations, and things change in the locations sometimes, like over time. It's just very, very real and natural. And it just makes me wonder, like, maybe, I really am. I'm just considering, maybe because it's so real, it's because I actually am, as my consciousness, as my spirit, whatever you want to call it, as my soul, able to go down into these places and not be physically affected, right? And then when the journey's over and I wake back up, I snap back out of it. So, but in either case, these are very interesting stories, so I'll share them. And I haven't embellished anything here. I don't need to embellish anything. The stories are incredible as they are. So, first of all, I've done a quick little sketch here on the chalkboard to help illustrate something. So, I've had the dreams where I go into this inner earth kingdom so many times, but out of the so many times, there's a few secret entrances that I always vividly remember, even in waking life off the top of my head. There's two or three in particular. One of them I just sketched out on the board. It's nothing fantastic. I could not tell you what country it's in, but nonetheless, or any of these really, but they are English-speaking countries. But the other thing I just want to mention, I'll mention it now before I get into everything. And this video will have absolutely nothing to do with Freemasons and this and that there. And I have nothing against Freemasons. I don't believe in all these crazy theories a lot of people do. But anyways, right? Members of my family were Freemasons. But anyways, I've always personally been interested in ancient civilizations and all of that. And I know that Freemasons are as well. Okay, and as above, so below. So anyways, there's possibly an interesting connection between Freemasonry and these underground inner earth regions. Not all of them, but at least some of them. Because in my dream once, I found a secret entrance into a Masonic lodge type area. It wasn't a lodge, but I'll explain it. And like I said, nothing against Freemasons, right? I'm just saying, I found a secret entrance into one of them. It's a really cool story. And it's connected somehow, or it's linked to this inner earth, I believe, because there's been like underground temples and chambers and passageways that I've gone through in my dreams. It's so captivating. Like going into these places, you feel like Indiana Jones. You feel like maybe I was the first person to ever discover these places since, however many thousands of years ago. That's the feeling I get when I go through some of these places that I'll describe. But I think it's possible because of that one little dream that I had where I found a secret entrance into a Masonic, and it was underground, but it wasn't very deep underground. But because there is that one link in the dreams, and because in general I know that they are fascinated by ancient civilizations, and there's a lot of lore about secret underground ancient civilizations and so forth, I'm just going to throw that out there. And my reasoning is maybe they are aware of secret ancient civilizations that were underground. I'm not going to claim if they're still here or what, maybe, apparently, according to my dreams that I'll explain. But I think they might just be aware of these ancient underground civilizations, right? That's all I'm going to throw out there. But anyways, right? So let's get started. So like I said before, the dreams are 100% real. All of them. They're always super, super realistic. Like when I'm in the dreams, it's like real life. And when I wake up from the dreams, I almost feel like I've been disconnected from a real life. Like they are that real. All the senses, absolutely, just everything's tangible. It's 100% real type of experience. And when I'm in the dream, I'm not aware. Well, often it's a play on words, but I can do what I want in dreams if they're lifelike dreams. Like most of my dreams, I can, right? So some people would say that's lucid dreaming, but I'm not aware that I'm dreaming. Like when I'm in these underground worlds, it's not like, oh, I know I'm dreaming and I can do crazy things like make rainbows appear. Not like that type of lucid dreaming. It's just lucid in the sense that it's dead real and it's like I'm really there. In that sense, right? So all the experiences are like that. But the way they always start off is that I'm on the surface, our Earth's surface somewhere in one of these countries or places. I don't think any of them are where I live in my country. In other countries, I think possibly up in Europe, at least one of them. So I'll mention the Masonic one to start off with, right? So for a little teaser, right? I don't know where this was. I get the feeling it was probably like England. So is picture like a British countryside. It was like at nighttime, and there's this big old grand, like I don't know if it was like a church or a church type building. It had like that fancy old architecture from like 500 or 1,000 years ago that you would see up in like usually Europe or Britain, right? There's that style of building, like stone and all that. Maybe it had steeples, but like fancy eaves and very ornate, inside it out, almost palatial, but more just like a church. Churches are kind of palatial, right? So I don't know what the place was, right? I'm just telling you what it was like. 100% crisp, real. And I think what happened was at first I was outside, so I was like in the grounds, in the grass, and just the moonlight illuminating the ground. And I'm in control of what I'm doing. It's like I'm really there. It's not that I am thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm dreaming. Let me do what I want." So it's just like I'm really there. So I'm walking around in the moonlit grass at night. Nobody else is around. It's nighttime, and I'll describe the inside of the building in a second because it's part of the story. But it starts off outside, and there's what it is there's a long corridor, like a couple 100 feet long, maybe 200-foot long corridor with tons of ornate old windows, right? But I'm walking on the outside of that, and it's like a grassy, I don't know if a knoll, it's like a small hill, like only about 10 feet high type thing, like a mound or a ridge next to the building, or it like drops down a little bit. So I'm walking across that, and then when I get around the corner, which is at the end of the hall, there would be some big grand doors. And if you were to walk out of those big ground doors, you'd be at the edge of that mound area I'm talking about, and it would dip down. And then just around is just like bushes, trees. It might break out into a forest within like 50 feet or 100 feet in any direction, right? It wasn't an open clearing everywhere. So if you were to come out of those doors, you'd, in a sense, just be visually look like you're in the corner of a yard on the edge of a forest or bushes. It doesn't look like much of anything. But what I did is I went down the mound, which is only about a 10-foot slope, and then just around the corner where it was out of sight. And just around the corner out of sight, there was this very old rustic looking doorway built into the mound. Like the doorway was cut out in the side of the mound. So the room that was inside was underground, so to speak, but not deep underground. So I was like, oh, wow, this is very interesting. So I go inside the place. It's lit by candles, no electricity. It feels like you've gone back in time a couple hundred years. Everything is very rustic, but masonry has places like this, right? So inside this room, it looked, there are so many things and just gadgets and things and artifacts everywhere, very rustic, but it was just like a plethora of Masonic stuff just everywhere. Just absolutely everywhere. It wasn't like a museum. It was not like a workshop, but it was, I don't know how to describe it, like somewhere in between. It was a Masonic place. Now, as soon as you go in the doorway, it was this big underground room, maybe like 30 feet across, 30-foot square, and like 30 feet by 30 feet roughly-ish, right? Or 20 feet by 20 feet, like wooden beams, pillars, supports, and all of that everywhere. And it was actually quite tall. So it was about, I don't know, I had to use a ladder to get up towards the ceiling. So I don't know, somewhere between 10 feet. I don't think it was 20 feet tall, but like between 10 and 15 feet tall. So I get into the room and looking around at all the little bits and bobs and things everywhere. And there was a tunnel corridor, like I would say hallway, but because it's underground, it's more like a tunnel, to my side. And with the candlelight everywhere, I could kind of see down into the tunnel, but I could hear voices. Like there was one or two people down there. And I was like, oh, and I was upset because I was like, I just got in here, just found this amazing place. I want to look around at everything, but there's people here and I don't want to get caught, right? So I got really scared that they were going to walk up that tunnel and into this room because they would hear me. So when I looked around the room really quickly, I was thinking, okay, of all the things that are here around me now, there's probably dozens of little items and interesting things. I was like, what out of all of these do I want to look at up close? And I looked around and I thought to myself, during this experience, I was like, this is how real it is. I thought to myself, and I was like, well, they're going to try and hide the most important stuff, the most interesting stuff. So it's not going to be laying out in the open, even though all the stuff around looks very interesting. I want to look at it. So I look around up at the ceiling, just in the corners, just everywhere. And I noticed that up in the ceiling, kind of over the door entrance, like out of sight, you could go in the room, look everywhere, you wouldn't notice it. But if you turn back around and look up, there's like a wooden box built into just below the ceiling, about 10 feet up or so, and you need a ladder to get there. There was a wooden ladder. So I grabbed the ladder, put it there, and went up to the box, and it wasn't locked, or they had a lock on it that was unlocked, one of the two, and I opened up. I'm making a video. One sec. So anyways, so I opened up the box, and there was all these old books. Hold on, my cat's meowing. Hey, kitty. So I opened up the box, and there was all these old books, and like the Masons would have, like very interesting looking books, very like I don't know how ancient, but antique or ancient books. So I was like overjoyed. I was like, oh wow, this is the type of thing I would want to see. So I grabbed some of the books out and I was flicking. But the problem is the voices that I heard were coming up the tunnel, so I had no time to look in detail at anything, and it was really irritating me. But I opened up some of the books and I was just flicking through them. I didn't want to just like flick to one page and look at one thing in detail, because then I'd only see one page, and I got all these books here, right? So I just flicked through everything as much as I could. And they started to come in. They were getting close enough to the room where I think they would have heard me, right? And I got the impression they knew that I was there. So I can't even remember if I had time to put the ladder back where I found it, but I scrambled down and ran out of the room before they visually came into the room. So I didn't know if I'd gotten away or if they had heard me or what, right? So I ran, and those big doors that I mentioned at the end of the hallway for that big churchy type building, whatever it was. So I climbed up that little moundy knoll, whatever you call it, went up to the double doors. They were unlocked, or somehow I went through them, and I went into there. Um, and then I was running up the hallway. So the hallway it was so vibrant and real on the inside, like just absolutely real. It looked like, I don't know, not Victorian. I mean, it could be 1,000 years old. I don't know, but just very ornate. Tons of these tall windows all the way down the corridor. So the moonlight's coming in. There's no light or candles on the inside. It's just dark inside the building. It's just the moonlight shining through all those windows down like the 100 or 200 foot long corridor. I can't remember the exact color of stuff, but like a burgundy colored rug going all the way the length of the whatchamacallit, lots of like nice old wood tables here or there, lots of ornamentation and things everywhere, very intricate looking. So I ran down there to just try and get away. So I figured if I stayed outside, I'd be very visible because it was like the yard space, right? I would stick out like a sore thumb. So I ran into the building. I'm going down the corridor. And then I don't know if it was one of the guys who was in that room or that secret place, or if this was a guy who was in the church area and he heard me. But a fully real, like again, this whole experience is real, but I mean, it looked real, felt real, tangibly, and all that. But this old white guy, probably British, I think, spoke English, and the people in the rooms down there were speaking English too. I don't know what they're talking about. They're talking to each other, muffled off in the distance. But this old white British-looking guy with white hair, probably in his 80s, maybe not 90s, probably in his late 70s or 80s, well dressed in like a suit, like a black suit, probably had like a bow tie. I don't even think it was a tie. Looked very nicely dressed. Um, it could have even been like Masonic ceremonial dress. I'm not sure, but he had a nice suit on and all of that. And he walked out into that hallway from like one of the openings, right? Because they have like big arched openings into other sections of the building, right? As you go down the hallway, he came out of one of them, and he looked at me, and he looked me square in the eye because I was like a few feet in front of him, and I didn't know what to say. I was petrified. I thought he was gonna like bust me for being in there or whatever. Again, this is just a dream. Um, but he looked at me and he was astonished. When he looked at me, he had this astonished look on his face, and he said, "How did you get in here?" And then as soon as he said that, I like vaporized, teleported out of there, like felt like by my will, but it was just like boom, and then I disappeared. So I remember laughing to myself in retrospect, like he must really think I have powers or something, because it felt so real. It was like I actually traveled there in my spirit or my soul. So it might be possible if that actually happened in some way. Just saying, it would be cool. They may, if it was real, they may have seen me as like a ghost or like like a force being or something. You know what I mean? That's pretty interesting. But it was absolutely real. So, but I can't remember what I saw in those books, unfortunately. Now, the reason why I mentioned that story is it's underground for those various reasons, but there was a tunnel off to the side. And for all I know, that tunnel could have gone down and the reason I mention that is because of these other experiences I'll mention. So, one of them, this is just a very crude drawing, but instead of trying to picture it. So again, it's some countryside somewhere. I have absolutely know what country this is. It could be anywhere on the earth. There's never people around speaking a language that I'm aware of when I'm in this location, so I can't pin it down. So it could be anywhere, but it's like in a forest. There is a path going. Well, let's just show it, right? So this is just like a long sloping path, like natural path. I don't think it's man-made. Could just be natural. It's like a sloping little hill, not very tall, right? And similar to like the last story, similar type of thing. But there's trees growing all down the side of it on either side. It's treed in, and in the middle is this beautiful, like cool, dimly lit path you can walk down. In the background, it's just general forest, trees, this and that there, right? Um, but like there's like a ridge or whatever you call it behind. So what the point is, when you're walking on this path, it's kind of like out of the way and hidden away. So in theory, if you were up here on this side, you wouldn't see this, right? Only if you were to walk around the corner, come down here, then you'd be like, oh, I see this little path leading down. Everything looks natural, trees and everything. Now, in similar fashion to the last story, when you get down to the edge here and you go around the corner a little bit out of sight, there's a natural cave entrance. So not wooden reinforced or anything, just a natural opening. And when you go inside of it, it's not very big, just big enough for like two people wide or something. Now, when you go into the entrance, it's a very long natural tunnel, like cavern tunnel. It goes on and on and on. Just natural rock stone sides. So I remember going into this tunnel, had very soft, like cool, like not sand, but like ground up dirt, like dirt floor, and just keep going down this tunnel over and over. Now, the interesting thing is that in my dreams, I'm never afraid or claustrophobic, even though I'm going through all these crazy tunnels and narrow passageways that I'll get into, right? Um, that's what it kind of concerns me when I wake up, because if that happened to me in real life, there's no way on earth that I would be going in places like that. So it's kind of bizarre how in my dreams the thoughts of the fear don't even cross my mind at all, which is bizarre. But anyways, I in real life I have done spelunking, like I've explored caves I'm pretty sure nobody else has gone into, and it was a lot of fun. And some of them are very dangerous, and I could have dropped down into the abyss. But it was a whole pile of fun, and I love doing it. And you see like cave crystal and this and that there. But where I live, it's nothing fancy though. No fancy crystals, just like quartz or something. But anyways, right? So I do find that interesting, but I'm also petrified of caves, right? It's like that thrill factor. Um, but I probably wouldn't do it again because it's very dangerous. So I'm going down this long tunnel, and basically here, the tunnel openings over here. So you're going all the way through here. So it's very long. And then it just keeps going and going. And essentially what it does is, well, let's put it this way. When you go inside that passageway, it's not just one passageway. It branches out, right? I don't know how many branches, might just branch off one more time, but it's not a singular passageway. And the other interesting thing is this, is that you don't always get to the secret locations, these underground temples or gem deposit places, like these treasure storehouses, and the Agartha type civilization that's down there that I get to often. You don't reach those places by taking the main path. So when you're going down this long passageway in that place that I just showed, the way I get to the secret locations is by taking off like little shoots off the beaten path, off the standard path, right? I don't know where the standard path takes you. And it's weird because when I'm in the dream, I'm just so keen on exploring. And I'll give away one secret, is that the reason, I forgot to mention this, the reason I found this entrance, the only reason I found this entrance, is because there's a very beautiful, and I have no clue what it is, which gemstone it is, but there's a very beautiful natural gem deposit that forms, and it's visible on the outside around here, right? The average person might not notice it, but because I like rocks and geology and all that, I notice all sorts of things when I walk around. So that's how I first discovered the entrance. Was I saw this interesting looking gemstone deposit, like an outcrop, and it was on the surface, right? And I was like, oh, if this is on the surface, there must be a cave and a deposit inside the cave that would be even better, right? So by doing that, that's how I found the entrance. And one of the secrets for me is that the way that I've been led to all the secret locations is by following the trails of gem deposits on the insides of these caverns. Now, that actually does make some logical sense, because if ancient peoples were going to mark their path or have a path, and make it like a labyrinth. If you don't put up signs, the best way to conceal signage would be natural signage, right? So what I would do is I go through the main tunnel, is I see this like the veins of gemstone deposit, and there's a lot in there, right? But I follow them. It's almost like an instinct. It's just, I like gemstones and my curiosity. But like, for example, you're going down the main path for about 200 feet and it gets darker and darker, right? And somehow there might be like natural, like some form of ambient light or candle light. It does get darker as you go further in, so it might just be the daylight coming through that tunnel. And there may have been like one or two little fissures in the ceiling that let some light in, right? But it gets darker as you go in. But along the main route, about 200 feet in, there's a left. There's a little branch to the left. Now, the average person, I'm just showing you one example of the complexity of this labyrinth type effect, right? If I was to continue the main path, I don't know where that goes, right? But because I was following the gemstone veins, I noticed a little cut to the left. And it was like the main path might be 10 feet wide, 15 feet wide. It's quite large inside. And the ceiling might be about 8 feet tall. The side cut path is about 2 feet wide, and it just looks like a fissure in the rock. Most people would be like, oh no, I'm not going in that. But because I'm following the vein of the gemstones, which ran into that, split, that gap, and I go through there, I notice that the gap keeps going. It's like another tunnel. And by following that and following the gemstone deposits, long story short, that's the example. That's how I found the entrances from the surface for almost all of these. And in general, I think it's possible that these are like markers for the secret routes through the labyrinth. So nonetheless, by following that, and it's very, like, in waking life, I look back thinking, why on earth I wouldn't do that in real life? Like, that's petrifying. But there are places where, like, say for example, I go through that side cut and I come out into another part of the labyrinth, right? It just looks like another tunnel with one or two side branches. Now here's another example of the complexity. So it's not just, like a side cut that's 2 feet wide. There's other ones like this. And I remember distinctly that to get to one of these locations I'm about to describe, you have to take this path. So this is how well it's hidden. You'll be walking along the main passageway again for a short distance, and to the left on the ground, it just looks like a crack in the ground, just big enough to squeeze your body through. So like a foot wide. That's the one I go through. I squeeze through that again because of the gemstone deposit, right? The vein. I go through that gap. You have to squeeze through it like a key. When you get through there, it drops you down at a nice slope. So it doesn't injure you or anything. You just go kind of down like a slide. And then, boom, I end up in this little, like, very small little cave type, like cavern. Very small, natural. And there's a vent, a technological vent, like what we have in buildings, like a ceiling vent, like you would have up in air ducts. So I'm looking down through this like slatted vent or whatever, and I can see like what looks like a laboratory, like a medical room or like an aquarium medical room. And I'll never forget the first time this happened. I've gone back to this location at least, probably I've gone to this location like twice. I've gone back like once, and I've met the being that was there more than once. So the first time it happened, I end up down that little slide, that natural slide, and then, which is probably smoothed out by water or by hand, right? So you slide down, and I end up on top of this vent. So I just pop the vent out, drop down in the room. I don't have a choice because I can't go back up that tube, right? That's impossible, and there's no light. So I drop down into the room. It's, not necessarily more advanced than what we have now. It may have been more futuristic, but it didn't jump out at me as being uber futuristic. It certainly was not behind our times in terms of science and technology. So it was either modern or just a bit more than what we have now in terms of like tech and modernity. So I'm inside this little laboratory room, and it's about, say, 10 feet by 10 feet. It's not all that big, like lots of like stainless steel type surgical tables and little devices and instruments and tools and this and that everywhere. And there's another room connected to it that branches off perpendicular. And I go into that room. I remember seeing this as a child, these rooms. I can't remember how I got down there as a child, but probably through similar methods. But nonetheless, I remember being in this weird aquarium room many times before as a kid. It's one of the poignant things that I often experience in my dream. But I only encountered the being once or twice. So in this first experience, what happened was after I came out of the aquarium room, which I'll describe in a moment, this being walked in and shocked me, right? So let me just describe the aquarium room first. And again, I've experienced this aquarium room multiple times. So, and it's 100% real. So I go into this room and I'm looking around and it's like an aquarium, like, but it seems more to be leaning towards like a laboratory or medical or examination place rather than a museum. So that's the whole vibe of this structure that I'm in. So there's lots of like, and this is where it looks more advanced. These weren't like typical glass enclosures like we'd have on Earth now. It looked more advanced, but just different style than what we have or what we would probably do. But lots of these tanks, and they're built into like the stone of the walls and everything, right? Metal and all that, but just kind of futuristic and different than what we would normally design. But lots of, you could tell they're tanks, right? And they're filled with water, presumably ocean water. But in each of the tanks that I looked in, none of them are huge, mind you. There may have been like one window with a big tank behind it, but it's like all the windows into the tanks were not huge. Maybe some small, couple feet across, like maybe the biggest one was like 6 feet or something like that, right? There may have been like a very long rectangular one, but there wasn't like any big square view windows. Everything was kind of like rectangular in terms of windows. So, but each one that I looked into had very bizarre sea creatures that I've never seen before, right? It's very interesting. And I can't for the life of me describe them because there's so many tanks with so many different creatures, and each one is a creature I've never seen before. I don't recall seeing anything massive, but they are very unique and different looking. So, and you know, some more mundane ones, but just things I'd never seen before. So that room always fascinated me as a kid because I love nature. There's lots of things I like. I like geology. I like animals, all sorts of things, botany, all that. So I was always fascinated by that. And as a kid, I loved deep sea. What's up, Katie? As a kid, I loved deep sea creatures. I used to have books on them because they look so extreme and different. So I always found that room fascinating. But anyways, the first time that I went, the first story, sorry, the story that I just described, how I went down that chute, lifted up that vent, and then dropped down in the room, back to that one. In that experience, that was the first time that I encountered the lab tech. Now, the lab tech was not human. Okay. And when I dropped through and, you know, through that vent, I checked out the aquarium room real quick, came back in the lab room. There's a door that goes out into the Agartha world or whatever, right? The rest of the open underground kingdom. But he walked through this door. Now he's wearing a lab coat like a person would, bipedal like a person, had 2 arms, 2 legs, maybe more than 2, I don't know, but I had 2 arms and 2 legs, rough human shape. But the very strange thing is, and I don't know how the human mind could just create all this while you sleep. You know what I mean? It makes more sense to me that it could be real, and maybe on a quantum level, our consciousness floats around while we sleep. This is all just too fantastic for your mind to make up while you're not even awake or thinking. You know what I mean? So he walked in the room, but it wasn't human. The head of the creature looked like a weevil. Now, you know how weevils have like the beady black eyes, smooth insect, you know, hull, right? Like shell for their whole body. But they have that weird beak type nose that extends out. He had a beak type nose like that pointed down. It didn't point out like Pinocchio, it pointed down. And it looked like a weevil. I didn't sense any animosity from the creature, from the being. It was obviously intelligent because it was well dressed like a doctor, and this was obviously its room that it worked in, but it had the face of a weevil. Now, that is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I don't remember what its hands looked like, probably wearing gloves, I don't know. But in similar fashion, that creature looked at me and telepathically, because it didn't speak English, unless it did, but I just doubt in retrospect that it spoke English. But it must have been telepathically. It said, to the same extent, who are you? What are you doing here? How did you get in here? Right? He must have known about the tunnel, but he was probably just saying in general, who are you and where did you come from? So, anyways, there was no hostility or anything like that there. I think I explained. I just came through the vent. I came down the passageway, and just said, I just want to walk around and explore. So, I think the being was impressed that I found the place. So he was probably thinking, okay, this guy's special or whatever. I don't know. So he let me go through that door. So I go through the door. It's very cool because it kind of reminds me of like a hatch type door you'd see on a submarine. Not because it's underwater, but it was like an installation, like a facility. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. Like a military-ish. I don't know, not military, but like medical facility. It was just interesting, very industrial look. So, anyways, I walk out of the doorway, and I can't describe all this in extreme detail, but you can obviously tell that you're underground. It's in some giant cavern system, huge caverns, because you got natural rock wall all around, but huge ceilings, like 100 feet or something like that or more. Just very, very big expanse. And but yet there's steps and walkways, and there's other buildings and structures. So that's like one of the ways into the Agartha world, right? It's probably a very obscure entrance into it, but that's just one of them. So that Agartha, for lack of a better term, I can that Agartha world, for lack of a better term, I can describe this one location in there because I've gone back to this certain location so many times. It may be right at that spot where you come out of the door. I do believe it is, um, like 90% certain or so, but it doesn't really matter, right? So this other location actually has a beach. Now, the ocean water, whatever it is, but science has proven there are oceans under our surface oceans, right? So science has proven this now. But there were oceans down here. I don't know how big it was, but there's a beach. The water is very, very dark, and doesn't look all that inviting and safe. Now, where I live, we have beautiful beaches. You can see through the water. This is not something I'll go swimming in. But it's just like a shore. Yeah, I don't know how far out it goes or whatnot, but it's inside of a cavern. Okay. And so if you look up, you just see this big cavern. It goes up quite a bit. Like I said, 100 feet, couple hundred feet, I'm not sure. There is light in there. I don't know if it's like some bioluminescence. I'm not saying it is. I think it's technological, because it's a developed city down there. Now, there's always a lot of beings or people, uh, down here. Human. And there's something else interesting I'll mention, uh, that I saw once. I don't. I can't claim that I look at all these people and I can discern, if they're just like us or maybe a lost ancient tribe or race that looks slightly different. There's one time I did see and spoke with a person. I don't know if it was at that beach area, that shore area, or somewhere else, but it was in one of the underground experiences. And they had three eyes. So they had a natural eye right here. Very friendly. Um, so I don't know if all these people have that or if these people down by the shore just look like us. I don't know. But there's lots of people around. And I'm open to believing there's other beings, not just human, right? But there's a lot of people around, pretty much like us, and they're enjoying the shore like we would on the surface. So some of them come out, they're hanging out on the shore, having like a little beach get together celebration. It's just like what we do on the surface, but there's no like sun in the sky and all of that. There's light, but again, I don't know if there's natural light down there plus the technological light, or if it's all the technological. I don't know. But it's just a very real area. I can still picture it, to help you visualize it. There's like two little ridges of land that go out, and you can jump off into the ocean water. And in between them, it's like a horseshoe shape, small horseshoe. The beach might only be about 150 feet across, and the little ledges that stretch out are maybe like 15, 20 feet up in the air, so you jump and dive down into the water. Some people might, I wouldn't. Water is very, very dark, not a beautiful per se looking beach, but nonetheless. But all around you are like these giant cavern walls going up. So anyways, there's like a main road or pathway or whatever. I don't remember seeing any vehicles down there, but they might have like rudimentary vehicles or like electric vehicles. I don't think they have gas combustion down there. It's probably not logical to use that. Um, but there is like this road, and it's very strange because it is a modern city, but when you look, it's not like when you're down there and you look at it, it looks like, oh, this looks like a future city from another planet, like from a sci-fi movie. It doesn't it I don't remember it ever striking me like that. So I think it's because the homes, their style of architecture is not that far removed from what we do currently, maybe just a little bit different looking and maybe a little bit more advanced, similar to like the laboratory. So it doesn't look like super futuristic and completely alien, but it does look different and does look slightly more advanced. Isn't that right, Katie? You been there, Katie? So, anyways, um, but it's a city. It's not huge, but all I can really picture and remember from it um, is it might be like a few blocks long, and it could be that it extends out further. But I can only really remember like the area that I'm describing, like the area of the shore with the start of this little town or city, might be only half a mile across or quarter mile across from like where the shore is to the edge of the cavern. It's not huge, but it's still big. Um, I just don't know. I don't remember. I probably did, but I don't remember walking, perpendicular to that out into the cavern deep, the giant cavern deeper through the city. I just don't remember. But it is like a town or a city. Um, and there was one experience, I can't remember where it took place, it may have been there, but one of the citizens had three eyes. They might all have had three eyes, but I was having a conversation with this person who looked human, but slightly different. But they were human, but they had naturally a third eye right here, just like the other ones. Same, not different, not bigger, smaller. Perfect match, just a third one up here. And I remember thinking when I looked at them that it actually looked, natural, and it looked nice. It didn't look weird, right? The way it was situated and everything looked natural. It looked kind of cool. I always thought that someone with three eyes might look strange, but it didn't look that strange. I mean, it is strange in the sense that it's different, but it's not like they had a big cyclops eye or some weird little beady eye. It's just a third eye there. Um, so, anyways, that was interesting. So I don't know if they all have three eyes down there, but that one person did. And obviously, if that one person has it, they're from a race of peoples that have it. But again, this is all dreams, right? But it could be real. I don't know, but it's all dreams. So, anyways, the other interesting things, right? Underground temples. So when you're going through that labyrinth of underground passageways and through all the nooks and crevices to get to secret areas and whatnot, there's been a lot of temple type places that I've discovered. Oh, and the other thing, another Masonic connection. My grandfather was a Freemason, and he met me in one of the dreams in one of these underground temples. So yeah, this was after he passed away, and he was in a room down there. This is a very strange story, but I'll just tell it what it is. So, anyways, I get down into, I'm going through the tunnels, end up into this underground chamber, which is more like a temple, and it struck me as unoccupied, unused. It didn't look like something that's used. So I got that amazing feeling, like that ancient nostalgia, Indiana Jones. I made a huge discovery type thing. You know what I mean? and it's an awesome feeling. Like nobody else has ever seen this for thousands of years. I'm the first person, and I can't prove it to anybody, right? But it had like let's just say, but welcome, man. Yeah, I may have said this one before. I probably said most of these before at one point in time over the years. So this room, just for people to visualize, maybe about 70 feet wide, probably not 100, more than 50, about 70 feet wide. Everything's stone. Um, nice grand stone entranceway, big broad steps, stone steps, a few steps high, takes you down into a nice large stone floor that's very open, like open floor plan. And it looks ancient, right? It's not ornate, it's not modern whatsoever. It's ancient, like thousands and thousands of years old. But there was a dinosaur skeleton like displayed. So whoever and this is entirely possible, ancient peoples who went underground could have found dinosaur skeletons, spent the time, cleaning them off and all that, and then putting them on display, just like we do today. 100% realistic. But it was something like an Allosaurus or a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was a theropod, if that's the right word, a theropod like that. And the skeleton was on display to the side on the wall. I love dinosaurs, so I was looking at that like, this is so cool. Nobody else, nothing was there. Nothing had been in there for what looked like thousands of years. Obviously, some people might know where it is and go there, but it looked untouched. So I can't remember all the other rooms and this and that there, but it was a big, relatively big complex underground. So, anyways, in one of the like everything stone, like stone type hallways I'm going through, but very like square, smooth, flat edges. Nothing's rough. Like everything's nice masonry work and all of that. So I'm going down one of these corridors, like stone walls, ceiling, everything, right? And it branches off into different rooms and everything. And in one of the rooms was my grandfather, the one who was a mason. So, but he had died at the time, right? Years before, or I don't know. It might have been right after his death. I don't know. But it was after he had died in real life. So I remember when I saw him there, I was like, "You're alive? How are you here?" And I can't remember everything he said to me, but he warned me. He said like, "Oh, watch out! They're gonna spot you." And he didn't say who, but the weirdest thing happened. This is so bizarre. I don't know, but I'm just relaying the story. Remember, if you watched the old 50s and 60s sci-fi shows and movies, they always had the same type of looking robots. They had like little um, tank tracks, like the little roller tank treads. They didn't have wheels or legs, right? It was like an army tank bottom, and they would roll around on that, and it looked like an R2D2 type of thing, like a little cylindrical type robot, like a monitor drone type robot. And one of these things just comes down the hallway, like it was scanning it, like a security guard. This this dream that I had is probably like 30 years ago or 25 years ago that I had this dream. So a long time ago, before we actually had working robots. And doesn't look anything like something from the movies, right? But it's along those lines. And it was patrolling down the hallway, like scanning. It was pretty rudimentary because I didn't have to do any James Bond style stuff to escape its sight. But he was like, "Oh, you just come in the room next to me," and like he was laying on a bed. So I think I don't know. At the time, I kind of got the impression maybe, his spirit or soul came here to this place to help me out in my little mystical journey. Right? That's what I felt at the time. And he was just like, "Oh, to help me out." He's like, "Watch out! You don't want them to see you." So I hid under the bed. He was like under the covers or something. So the robot just went by. It was pretty rudimentary robot, right? Just went by. You didn't go in each room and meticulously check everything. It was like patrolling the main hallways. And then it went past. But that was always such a bizarre thing to occur. Like, why would there be a robot down there? You know what I mean? Like made out of metal and stuff too. Um, but not super futuristic and fancy looking. Again, just a little bit more advanced than what we would have. Or we're probably capable of making something that looks like that now. Don't get me wrong, like now, but not 20, 25 years ago. So, anyways, that was always very interesting. So there's been a lot of different like cool underground ancient temples like that there. Um, but the other thing that I wanted to describe, one of the main things that I had on my list to talk about was these gem deposits, right? And it's not just because I have a fixation on geology type stuff, partly is, but for me, it's just so absolutely cool, right? I know I'm dorking out here. Not everybody will find it as cool, but if you're walking, they could be valuable too, right? So, but I always wished I could bring some of the crystals back in my pockets back into this world, but so far it doesn't work. But one day maybe. But anyways, there's so much of these things like growing these gemstone outcrops like in these underground passageways. Like I said, you follow the veins, you can get to these secret locations. So anyways, there's tons of different places and that I've been to down here, right? And there's a lot of these places where the gemstones are heavily deposited, like naturally. And I think in retrospect, what it is that the ancient peoples who were whatever, maybe other beings or whatever, who journeyed down here themselves in ancient times or in modern, they discovered these. And they may have discovered them by following them from the surface like I did, right? Just natural instinct. Hey, that looks pretty. Let me follow it, right? And then you follow it enough, you get to the mother lode, whatever you call it, and it's just like a room full of it, right? Not literally. It's not like 100%, right? But it's like one of the rooms, for example, because I went there last night. This is one of the reasons I'm like, hey, I want to share this story. So this room I'd been to many times before. I don't intricately remember how to get there because it's like a labyrinth down there. I don't have it all mapped out in my head. I'll just end up in whatever different places. But there's this one room that I've gone to a few times. I went back there again last night. Now, last night it had changed. Part of it had collapsed, like as if from an earthquake. And I was disappointed because a lot of the beautiful gems were covered by like the ceiling or floor that collapsed. But again, this is like another level of realism. But anyways, the room itself is just like a natural underground cavernous room, maybe 50 feet across, maybe like 50 feet high, right? And it's been like some masonry work has happened in there. And I mean, like, construction masonry work. I'm pretty sure there's like smooth stones and yeah, there was. So it's like half natural, but with masonry work done. So to accentuate it. So I think ancient peoples, somebody's been using it or has used it as like a, place where they mine these gems. If you get my point, it's like one of the many underground chambers, right, where they naturally occur. But whoever discovered them, like the miners, would build this, would you know reinforce the room with these stone slabs and this and that there, and make it like a room, make like a little ramp, and you can go and chisel out the gems when you want. And there's so much of it. I mean, if all this is real, then ancient peoples, if they discovered things like this, I don't know what gems they are. They could be worthless, but they look beautiful. And there's like different types and whatever. I mean, for all I know, it could be rubies and all sorts of important stuff. But if all this is real, can you imagine how much wealth the ancient civilizations potentially could have had if these things are real and they discovered things like this? Um, so, anyways, when I went back to the room in my dream last night, something had caved in. So I went in there so excited because I've been tracing the vein of the gemstones again. Got to this chamber room, came in the room, and the size of the stone slabs that had collapsed were massive. They were like, the stones were like 10 feet thick or something crazy, massive. I don't know where they came from, but it looked like a little earthquake had happened in the area. And these like two big slabs, big enough to cover up the 50 by 50 drop down, they had like collapsed and almost entirely covered the gemstone outcrop. So if those slabs weren't there, you would have come in the room through that like stony archway entrance. There's no doors. And then you just walk down this constructed path, like stone path, and it just lead with big smoothed out stone walls in like the gem pit or whatever you would call it. You go down the little path and all the rocky outcrop is right there at the gems everywhere, like thousands, tens of thousands of pounds, 100,000 pounds of these gemstones, just natural outcrop. But all of that rock outcrop was covered by like these two giant broken slabs that fell. And I was, you could still see some of the gems, but I was like, oh man, like I came all the way down here and I don't get to see it. But very, very interesting stuff. So there's, I love searching out the gem outcrops like that. It's just really fun adventure for me, and I would love to solve the mystery behind it all. And it's just pretty interesting stuff, if you ask me. So I think there was another story. Um, what's up, Kitty? Let's see. Mention the gemstones. Mention that Weevil type being, the city, three-eyed person. I think I may have mentioned all the stories. I feel like I'm forgetting one, but no, I think that's it for tonight. So, anyways, I hope you all found that stuff interesting. It's certainly interesting to me. I'm excited to share it. Um, and again, the enigma remains, like, what if these places are real, and all that's happening is that when we go to sleep at night, that everybody or some people are able to, their consciousness on whatever quantum type level can disconnect and then journey around, and then they can see, or maybe they're not moving anywhere, but they're able to see a distant place like remote viewing via quantum entanglement, right? It could be something like that as well. But in either case, what if it's all real? That's the cool part, right? These are interesting things, interesting to consider. What are the implications? Well, if this is real, it just proves that there are big, giant underground cave systems, tunnel systems, natural, even giant cavern systems that have been obviously utilized by cultures, whether modern or ancient. I think ancient based on what I've gone through, plus modern. It could be that the more modern, um, when I say modern in that sense, I just mean, ancient peoples utilized it first, and then after them, after other epochs, later other ones came in and utilized it. And those later other ones coming in might have come in 5,000 years ago, and they may have been space beings that came in and utilized these ancient tunnels that some ancient humans discovered 20,000 years ago in the Neolithic age, right? So, very interesting and cool stuff to consider. It also links over, you could say, to the Great Pyramid. Again, that's another link to Masonry. Um, I have another video up where I argue that the Great Pyramid was probably built using elephants. But in that video, towards the end, I just wanted to fit in a little story, that a little theory that I had, that, and I'm just saying this as an example to draw everything together in conclusion here, right? That ancient and Neolithic peoples, such as with the Great Pyramid time, could have very well discovered these things. Now, in the lore, in Masonic lore and in other, supposedly there are and I think they have found some actual underground tunnel systems in Egypt, like bona fide, like science says so. But the lore says that there's a big, vast underground tunnel system that's very ancient, in that the ancient, like Neolithic Egyptians who built the pyramid discovered it. And there's other lore about beings being down there, right? But you see how all this connects, like different humanoid type beings. But anyways, I said in my Great Pyramid video that it's makes the most sense to me that the Great Pyramid would be act. What do you want, Kitty? Catch a sister and meows nonstop. Let me put him outside. Come on, go outside. Kitty. Meowing nonstop. So, anyways, just to finish it off, right? The Great Pyramid is probably acting like a giant paperweight to block up a secret entrance, right? The entrance is probably concealed within the Great Pyramid somewhere, that takes you down into that region. Because if you think about it, the Great Pyramid doesn't act as a lighthouse, doesn't act as a castle, doesn't act in any function that makes any sense whatsoever. What it is a giant slab of rock essentially on top of the ground. And why would anybody go through that much effort to do that? It makes the most sense. And it's not even a tomb, because the one or two tombs that are in it, science says, are very likely pseudo tombs. There's no documentation where they documented building the Great Pyramid. There's no documentation. There's no effigies or anything inside the Great Pyramid ascribing it to any specific pharaoh. So at the end of the day, and it is like the most ancient structure, one of the most ancient. So I think it's most likely that if it's not anything else, what is it? What is it doing? Well, it's a giant paperweight on the ground, and it's probably blocking up that entrance that is alleged to be under the Great Pyramid. So it's like I say in that video, I think these ancient Neolithic peoples, when they started migrating across the world and journeying, they would have found all these natural gems. Like in ancient India, they used to find rubies on the beaches. The beaches would be covered in rubies because nobody had ever been there before or picked them up. And that's how a lot of these ancient peoples and kings got so wealthy, because back then you could just walk around and find all this stuff and be the first one to find it. There aren't any animals picking up gems and gold and stuff, you know what I mean, out of the landscape. So these ancient Neolithic peoples, as they wandered around the world, they undoubtedly encountered vast amounts of natural treasure, okay? Gold and gemstones and silver and everything else. And it's 100% realistic that they would hide it, okay? If everybody else is being nomadic at the time and exploring, and tribal wars were starting, they would hide it. And they probably hide it in mountains or underground, okay? So and I don't think necessarily that they made these underground tunnel systems. I don't know. Whoever made them, right? It doesn't matter. But I think, the theory that I pitched and threw out there was that under the Great Pyramid is most likely an underground cavern system with tunnels, little chamber rooms, and this and that there, where they would probably have stored their vast ancient wealth, right? And maybe secret knowledge and books and stuff like that, but primarily treasure. And they would block up the entrance like that. The other thing is maybe there's something spooky down there that they blocked up the entrance to, right? Maybe a race of reptilian beings or something crazy. But I'm just saying that's not going to stop them anyways, right? But I think it's just a treasure house. So, and that would make sense with the Freemasons, the wealth that they possess, and the knowledge, and the enigma with the Great Pyramid and all of that there. It'd just be very, very interesting. When you think about it, the Sphinx, or the two Sphinxes that used to be there, they look away from the pyramid. So it's like it's distracting you. So if you're a foreigner and you arrive to the Giza site, you'd see the Sphinx and it's looking over somewhere. So you think, oh, it must be looking somewhere important. So it's distracting you. That's the thing that all magicians do, is you have to use distraction and illusion. So it throws you off. The Great Pyramid, the biggest, most impassable thing, is going to be the one that you have to pass through. That's my reasoning, right? So inside there somewhere is probably some rock, some stone that when you push on it or go down through it, it leads you into the underground cavern, right? And they probably had directions to it in hieroglyphs and this and that there, and probably only the priests and the pharaohs knew how to get into it. So, and it could be very well that Freemasons or others acquired ancient texts or the ability to read certain hieroglyphs. And they might have gotten one stone tablet that the text isn't preserved anywhere else, but on that stone tablet, it might say in hieroglyphics the directions to secret underground places. Now, unfortunately, a lot of ancient artifacts are sold for private ownership at auctions. You'd think ancient artifacts should all be in museums, but that's not how the world operates, sadly. So wealthy people buy up ancient artifacts all the time. They go to auctions and buy them. So who knows how much of human history is sitting in somebody's house on display. And because people aren't reading, studying it, interpreting what the language says, we don't know part of human history. A lot of it is like that, right? So unfortunately, it could just be, that's the unfortunate situation. But because of that real unfortunate situation, it's very likely that over the last hundreds of years that certain peoples acquired ancient texts or tablets that revealed certain things. And just from that alone, it could have been one guy with one stone tablet, like, oh, there's a secret entrance here. They go down in there and they find a tunnel system with an underground temple and blah, 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 right? And from that, they can gain this knowledge and, the knowledge of the mysteries, as above, so below. That's where I'm seeing a possible connection here. But anyways, all very interesting stuff. I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'll check all the comments on the after. It's at 1 hour mark, so I better get cracking, and it's very late. So, anyways, take care, folks. God bless you all.